I want to we want to do two things today. First, I want to welcome all of our brothers and sisters in the Reformed Jewish community, our leader and brother, Rabbi Rick Jacobs, and our host and sister, Rabbi Dina. Also today, I want to, because of the circumstances that are going on, we have to speak to a very contemporary issue. And that is not only what we will be doing together in the NAACP and the Reformed Jews over the next few days in terms of voter registration, but I want to speak to the efforts that are being made to continue to suppress the African American vote. And after I speak to that, I'm going to ask Attorney Jonah to make a comment as a lawyer. We also have Bob Hall here who will make a comment, and then I'm going to ask Rabbi Jacob and whoever else he determines to speak as to why the Reformed Jews have decided to engage this national initiative right here in North Carolina. Let me ask the media who are available, who are you with? Yeah, you are. You got a media. With who?
The Reform Movement.
Oh, okay. The reason I asked them because I just wanted to make sure if our friends Civitas were over there, I would know them so I could read them real well. Okay, other media, CBS. 11 and 17. Thank you so much. I want to read something that the court said, judges unanimously, not Democratic judges, but federal judges, not some conspiracy of judges, but federal judges, not something we made the judges do, but what the judges did when they looked at the Constitution and what they looked and when they examined the actions of our General Assembly and Governor McCrory over against what our Constitution says. And I want to say that because it's deeply troubling to hear our Governor McCrory and the extremists that have hijacked the Republican Party, and I always say that because I don't believe they're Republicans because they're not acting like Lincoln, nor like Teddy Roosevelt or Eisenhower, nor like Justice Warren, who was over the Supreme Court when the Brown versus Board of Education case was passed was decided in the 50s. But they continue to say that what they're doing is to protect the state from fraud, and the courts have now said that is fraudulent. That claim itself is fraudulent.
That's right.
They continue to say that somehow the Democrats did this, but that is to suggest that our federal courts, when they rule unanimously, are operating based on some partisan conspiracy as opposed to the principles and the deep principles of our law and our Constitution. That is unsettling to think that a governor and a legislature would suggest that these federal judges above reproach, one actually who originally voted against us until she saw the whole record, would be engaged in some kind of conspiracy. The fact of the matter is that Governor McCrory and this legislature were caught red-handed, not once, but twice in less than 2 weeks. They were caught red-handed engaging in intentional discrimination, which is the highest standard, I believe, Attorney Jonah, in these types of cases. They could have been caught, and the courts could have said, well, they didn't realize what they were doing was intentional, but it's having a disparate impact, and the laws could have still been overturned. But that's not what the court said. The court said they knew what they were doing, and they intentionally did it.
That's right.
And they did it with surgical and sinister and cynical precision. And for our governor to now somehow suggest that the courts are wrong, that the federal courts unanimously are acting in a way that's unconstitutional, because when he appeals it to the Supreme Court, what he's really saying is, I don't believe they rule constitutionally. And for them to continue to suggest that they're trying to protect from fraud when there is no fraud, and can try to continue to get the media to report somehow that they're protecting from fraud when we know that is a fraudulent claim. And when they continue to suggest that somehow this is some conspiracy, Governor McCrory, and it pains me to say this, is sounding more like Lester Maddox in Georgia in the 1950s and 60s than he is how a 21st century governor. It was Lester Maddox in Georgia that when the Voting Rights Act itself was passed, said that it was immoral, unconstitutional, and unlawful. And the only other Southerner that said things worse than that about voting rights was Strom Thurmond. Why is it that a governor in this state and legislators in this state do not want people to vote, and particularly African Americans and Latinos? Is it because they know that when African Americans and Latinos join with progressive whites, when Jews and Christians and Muslims come together and look honestly at public policy, they cannot make their case in the public square, and they cannot make their case when there's a large voter turnout. And so the only way they can try to sustain victory is to create fraudulent claims, to literally suggest that the judges themselves are in contempt of their own court, and to ask the Supreme Court to join them in upholding intentional discrimination. The court said on page 23 of their ruling, these are not the NAACP words, we hold that the challenge provisions of SL 2013-381 were enacted with racially discriminatory intent in violation of the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment and Section 2 of the Voting Rights. Those are the court's words. That this governor and this legislature violated principles in our Constitution. One principle that has been in there since 1868. And the second principle they violated has been on the books since 1965, 51 years, because it's Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. So we want to make that clear. Now, in response to this, the governor asking the Supreme Court to reinstate, and think about what he's asking to do. He said, I know the court said this was racist, but I want you to reinstate racism.
That's it.
I want you to reinstate racism. I want you to reinstate the strictest form of voter ID, even though the courts have said, not just this court, but other courts around the land, that it's racist. It's racially discriminatory. And I want you to reinstate taking away early voting, even though the courts have said that's racist. And I want you to reinstate barring 16 and 17-year-olds from pre-registering. 16 and 17-year-olds. He wants the Supreme Court to endorse his racial and intentional discrimination. We just released a statement saying the Supreme Court should deny the governor's notions to stay and respect the ruling by the 4th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals unanimous decision. Oh, and the governor wants the Supreme Court to join him and these legislators in wasting taxpayer dollars to pay for legal fees in order to take away the civil rights of taxpayers.
Twisted.
It's very twisted. You spent over $5 million of North Carolinians' money to endorse racism and lost. And now you want to ask the Supreme Court to continue to assist you in violating the very Constitution that you, governor, and you legislators swore to uphold. And you want to do it not with your money, but you want to do it with our money.
Right, that's right.
Not right.
That's the state you've just come to, Rabbi. That's why we had to call in some reinforcements down here. That's why we're pulling everybody together. Christians, Jews, Muslims, Hindu, everybody. Because this this is bad, not just for North Carolina, this is bad for America. It sets the wrong precedent in America. It sets the wrong precedent, especially in the South. Now, the last thing I want to mention today is that we get the court ruling. The Fourth Circuit ruled, challenged these provisions, said they were racially intent, and Judge Schroeder entered his judgment and injunction in favor of the plaintiffs, restored early voting to 17 days of availability, along with same-day registration. Now, instead of the boards of elections at the local level and at the state level complying with the law, the letter and the spirit of the law, because the law is saying that to deny these things is discriminatory, so the spirit of the law would be you ought to provide more of that. We are now having to fight local boards of elections who are doing everything they can in many places to undermine the ruling of the court, trying to limit the availability, trying to say that there will not even be as much availability to early voting as there was in 2012, even though we know that more than 2.4 million North Carolinians voted early in each of the last two presidential elections. Over 56% of all ballots were cast during the early voting. And so what county boards should be doing is expanding the opportunity, not lessening the opportunity, unless your goal is to now attempt to suppress the vote by creating backups and long lines in order to discourage voters. Now, I know that some of the Christians don't believe that this is really going on in the 21st century. You know, I know that some people really believe, those who have said that we've moved on, that racism isn't really that bad, and surely people can't be racist in their heart. But we know something about racism. You don't look at the heart, you look at the heart of policy. And we can even look at the heart of emails, since they want to talk about emails in North Carolina. Because very seldom do you get this kind of evidence, Rabbi, this kind of evidence. You know, normally people would talk like this on a phone without writing it down. No, normally. But this crowd is not normal. Because the courts have already said they're not normal because they engaged in intentional discrimination. So just yesterday, we learned that Dallas Woodhouse, who always calls us names and says that we are, Money Moral Monday, I think he called us, and tries to blame me for things, and he says that this is just Democrats and trying to create fraud in the election. He's so concerned about the integrity. He's the executive director of the North Carolina GOP. And he sent a letter to all 100 counties. This just happened yesterday. The Lord knew y'all needed to come. This just sent yesterday. Asking them in an email to hinder the rights of North Carolinians. Put it in writing, right here. He said, county boards of election do not have to be unanimous in making early vote changes. Republicans should make party line changes. Lord, he said that.
Yes. Say it again.
He said, one more time, the governor, and I'll explain this to our people around the country. In the South, most of the time, many places, the governor controls the Board of Elections. So whoever gets elected the governor, they have the majority on the local Board of Elections, which means they have 2 seats. The executive director, Woodhouse, sent a letter saying to those 2 Republicans, don't do what the court says. Don't do what the Constitution says.
Right.
You make party line. Now, their party line is they don't want same-day registration, They really don't want early voting, and they want photo ID as restrictive as possible. Because the court said the goal of their party, at least in this state, is to surgically engage in racial discrimination. So he is literally in writing asking them to enforce the party line and not the principle line of the Constitution. But it gets worse. Many of our folk are angry and are opposed to Sunday voting for a host of reasons, including respect for voters' religious preferences. In other words, he's saying we shouldn't have Sunday voting because that's when people go to worship. But he's forgotten all about when Muslims go to worship and Jews go to worship. That's right. He says protection of our families and allowing the fine election staff a day off rather than forcing them to work on in without time off. 6 days of voting in 1 week is enough, period. Well, I wonder what Rabbi Heschel would say when they marched on the 7th day across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. Right. Our line is if 50 years ago we could be beaten to get the vote, surely 50 years later we can vote on Sunday.
Amen. That's right.
Then he says, no group of people are entitled to their own early voting site, including college students. So he's directing them to move, not even to place early voting, Dr. Spearman, on college campuses. And then lastly, he says, we need to fully support our BEO members as they make important decisions to follow the law and support Republican positions. Whose law? Rabbi, that's a good question. Whose law? Talk about law and order. The law has been established by the Constitution and by the courts. But he suggests that the Republican position is greater than the law, which actually then is really what finally answers and says to me the court was right. Because the court said they intentionally discriminated. In other words, they thought their positions were greater than the law of equal protection under the law. And now that the courts have ruled, they are actually actively engaging in methodology to undermine the court's decision.
That's it.
And that's why here in North Carolina, the NAACP and all of our partners and standing here today with our Jewish brothers and sisters, we will not be moved. This is why we say it's our Selma, it's our time, and it's our vote. Because we are facing a group of people who have hijacked the Republican Party, and in the name of extremism, they do not intend to do right. And so that makes us have to fight even harder for what is right. Irv, Bob.
I'm Irv Joyner, and I'm serving as one of the legal counsels for the NAACP. In the way of background, on July 29th, the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals issued an opinion, as Reverend Barber has described, which declared that the voter suppression enactments by the General Assembly of North Carolina and signed by its governor were racially discriminatory. And they were enacted for the purpose of minimizing or making it more difficult for African Americans and Latinos to vote. And in reading that opinion, it is probably a textbook rendition of what discrimination is all about. In chapter and verse, the court went into great details to explain each point, each fact that supported its conclusion that there was intentional racial discrimination. And one of the things that they looked at was the fact that the legislators sought and received racial data detailing how African Americans voted in past elections, and found that disproportionately they used early voting, particularly the first 7 days of early voting, that they used out of precinct voting, that they used same-day registration, that disproportionately these same people did not share the same kinds of ID as good, upstanding white people. And after receiving that information, they then went into the law to specifically ban those practices that were disproportionately used by African Americans. And not that those practices were illegal and unjust, burdensome in any way. It was because they encouraged the largest turnout of African Americans that this state and this country had ever seen. And they describe, as it relates to each of those provisions, exactly what the legislature decided. And then within seconds or within heartbeats, Governor McCrory signed that into law. And they have then dubbed that as a common sense way of fighting voter fraud. And to their way of thinking, for African Americans to want to vote and then to actually come out to vote is fraud. And the common sense application is to make sure that this disfavored group of people don't come out to vote, that every avenue that is available to encourage them to vote is cut off at the pass, that it is taken away from them so that they will be discouraged from voting. Now, the Fourth Circuit pulled the covers off. They pulled the sheets off the actions of the legislature and the governor. Now, Dallas Woodhouse wants to revisit that same racism and has adopted that motivation by the entire, or in the name of the entire Republican Party, and telling its operatives now that are at county boards of elections to deny what the General Assembly and Governor McCrory unsuccessfully attempted to do in the first place. And they have spent, Reverend Barber mentioned this, more than $5 million in that campaign. And just 4 or 5 days ago, hired this big-time lawyer in Washington, D.C. Well, every lawyer in Washington, D.C. is big-time. Who is charging the state $1,000 an hour. $1,000 an hour, which is more than many African Americans and Latinos make in a month. The state of North Carolina is eagerly paying this high-priced lawyer to now restate these arguments that they have already made and ask the Supreme Court now to endorse those arguments. Now, we have a team of lawyers, and then we have the boys in the hood in D.C., and they're standing on the steps of the Supreme Court. So we're going to meet them at the junction and deal with them in that legal arena. So we don't have any problem with that, except we're not being paid $1,000 an hour. And I would certainly like to be elevated to that status. But
You're beyond there.
to use our money in a campaign to endorse racism, not that I'm calling it racism. What I'm doing is talking about what the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals said. The Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals said it was with surgical precision that they cut out these provisions. And this state is now using, in the street we say, wasting taxpayers' money to fight a battle that need not have begun in the first place.
That's right.
But we're here, and we're going to fight it all as far as they want to take it. And then after the Supreme Court's decision is returned, which is normally the end of the fight, then we will use all of the rabbis and the ministers that are here then to petition God not to overturn that decision.
That's right.
I'm Bob Hall from Democracy, North Carolina. And I try to be brief, but I do want to pick up on what's happened here very recently. So you have the Fourth Circuit, you have the federal court slapping down the Republicans at the state policy level, saying what you've done is a racist strategy. Then instead of accepting that or recognizing it, being denied that, now the Republicans have gone to a local strategy, gone local to do the same thing. In the federal decision, the judges said the smoking gun for us is the elimination of Sunday voting, the first weekend, highly used in the African American communities. That's the smoking gun to us of how you've surgically chosen what you're doing. Now we have another email targeting, and it's a smoking gun itself of racist intent, or we're going to continue this strategy, and identifying what I want you to do, Republicans, is eliminate Sunday voting. Wherever you've put it in place, we want you to eliminate it. Now, fortunately, there are a number of Republican board members who are not listening to Dallas Woodhouse. They are giving some better respect to the oath that they took and respect for the voters. But unfortunately, there are many who are listening. In Vance County, which is a county that has had Sunday voting election after election after election, a Republican voted against it this time. Now it's not a unanimous plan for Sunday voting. In New Hanover County, which voted unanimously for Sunday in the March primary, had a Sunday. In fact, the highest use of any hours in the March primary were that Sunday. That was the best hours that they could afford for early voting. They are now wanting to eliminate that Sunday. In Greensboro, the chair of the board. In Charlotte, the chair of the board. They are saying they want to get rid of Sunday. They want to roll back all these things. But it's fortunately, folks have been organizing and pushing back. And they didn't get away with it in Charlotte. They didn't get away with it in Greensboro. We'll see what happens in Fayetteville. They're doing the same thing in Fayetteville today. Well, no, not today, in Wilmington today. All these counties are doing these things now. In Fayetteville, they again had a unanimous vote for Sunday. They met earlier and they couldn't get a vote. The Republican that had voted for it, now he says, no, I am not doing it. We have heard over and over again the Republicans on these boards are listening to the Dallas Woodhouses in their party. That is wrong. It's deplorable. They talk about rigged elections. Right. This is rigging the election. That's right. This is rigging the election in a fraudulent manner, and it should be stopped. It should be stopped by the State Board of Election. Any plan that comes up that has one vote for a Sunday should be adopted. They should reject the opinion of these Republicans that are used to be voting in favor of voters, now voting against. Thank you.
So members of the media, that's the first part of this piece. And we are organizing, we're volunteers. I'm a volunteer, Earl's a volunteer, most of our folk are volunteers. We certainly, the few that we have paid are not paid $1,000 an hour. All of our NAACP are volunteers, but we have to fight. Now, what I want to invite now is our rabbi friends to come and share with why they have chosen to join alongside of us to help us fight, if you will, this Goliath of racism. And there is a great historical linkage between African Americans and civil rights community and the Jewish community. I also want to note one other thing before we move from that issue. Dollhouse, is it Dollhouse? What's his name? Woodhouse. Dallas Woodhouse. I mix it up. Dallas Woodhouse and our governor and our legislators have a case. It's not Zika. They have a case of Trumpitis, and that is, first of all, doing wrong and then blaming other people. And then once you don't get your way, you whine or you distort the fact. You know, as soon as this decision was made, Trump came here and said, well, I guess there'll be all this fraud in North Carolina as well, and he's stumping today. That's what this is. It is being endorsed from the highest parts of our political system by extremism, and it's trickling down to the local levels, but we intend to fight it from the lowest levels all the way up, because we will not let anybody undermine our right to vote. We never have, and we never will. Rabbi Preston, if you want to come and introduce our great friend here.
My pleasure. Well, I am from Washington, but I'm not a high-priced lawyer. I'm Rabbi Jonah, and I direct the Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism, the site of the drafting of what? The Voting Rights Act of 1965. We're very proud that the Reform Jewish movement was the institution that hosted the Leadership Conference for Civil Rights, the movement that drafted this important piece of legislation that was eviscerated by Shelby. And so I'm joined here today by many Jewish leaders from across the United States. We at the Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism are a joint instrumentality of the Central Conference for American Rabbis, Rabbi Steve Fox, our chief executive, and we have dozens of rabbis who've come to North Carolina, and the Union for Reform Judaism, which is the congregational body representing the largest denomination in Jewish life, more than 900 congregations and millions of souls, and we're joined by our president, Rabbi Rick Jacobs. Before we hear from Rabbi Jacobs, though, all politics are local, and we could not, in the Reform Jewish movement, live this commitment to racial justice and voting rights in America without the frontline rabbis and congregations and leaders who are fighting this fight right here in this sacred congregation, this temple, this Beit Or, this house of light. Rabbi Lucy Dinner.
Shalom Haverim. There's a reason we're here at Temple Beth Or. I want to welcome you to the home of the launch of the Union for Reform Judaism, with partnership with the NAACP's rally for voting, for voter rights, for voter registration, starting today and going forward to the polls. We will be here each and every day. I am here before you to say that what is happening in North Carolina is not an accident. It is not just because we are the South. It's because we have been chosen as the petri dish for the rest of the nation to follow. We don't like this choice. We're not accepting this choice. When they say we can't vote on Sundays because that violates the Sabbath, I say, whose Sabbath?
That's right.
Is that the Christian Sabbath or the Jewish Sabbath or the Souls to the Polls Sabbath that has been the tradition of African Americans? Is it the Baha'i Sabbath? I say to our governor, let those who are ministers, rabbis, preachers, let us take care of the souls of North Carolina.
There it is, Rabbi Dinner.
I'm asking the governor and I'm asking all of these boards of elections today, along with the rabbis and their communities who are here to support us from across the nation, to open accessibility to voting to every single person who is eligible, not to put up roadblocks, but to open the door so that we can restore the greatness of the democracy of the United States of America.
All right.
Thank God.
All right.
Rabbi Rick Jacobs. I'm the president of the Union for Reform Judaism. As was just said, we are the largest and the strongest movement within Jewish life. And we are here today not simply to watch, not simply to pray, not simply to learn. We're here to stand up for justice. We're here because we have a God who is impatient with injustice. We have a tradition that demands that we have the moral courage to stand against discrimination, to stand against hate and bigotry, and to stand up for what is right and true. So we're here in North Carolina, but we represent all over North America, all of our congregations. We are here bringing the strength of our movement because we stand today and we will be building the will all the way through our election day to take down all these barriers that are being erected to get in the way of the sacred right to vote. This is not something that can be taken away. It is given. And it is a religious obligation as well as an obligation of being a citizen of this great country that promises freedom and that demands justice. So we're not just going to walk and we're not just going to talk, but we see the bonds across lines of faith and class and ethnicity. And those that are being kept out from the voting booth, it's not an accident. It's not random. It is discrimination in its purest form, as was just cited. It is literally the stated goal of the voter suppression laws and all the things that are being taken away that we fought so hard to enshrine in law. And we know that this is the front line in the campaign to bring not only more people into the voting booth, more voices into the choir of our democracy, more people who will express wherever their will is, but we need to hear them, and the votes count. And if your vote doesn't count, you don't count.
That's right.
And this state of North Carolina is saying, particularly to people of color, to African American and Latinos, you don't count. That is not only objectionable, it is sinful, it is wrong, and we will not abide that. So we'll stand strong, we'll stand together, we'll feel the leadership from across our 2,000 rabbis and almost 2 million people who know that what it means to be a person of faith is that you stand for something. And when someone is experiencing injustice, you not only feel that pain, but you rise up to confront it and to correct it and to heal it. That's our tradition. Tzedek, tzedek tirdof, the book of Deuteronomy says, justice, justice you shall pursue. It doesn't say it's going to be handed to you. That's right. It says you're going to have to run after it, and you're going to have to run and chase it with all of your strength. But that's what we are called to do. So we are here today, and we will be here tomorrow. And we will bring the strength of our congregations. We'll bring all of the goodness and the kindness and the love and the commitment and the backbone that it will take to get this done. Reverend Barber, you are a force for good in the world.
Amen.
But you will never, ever have to fight alone.
That's right.
And not only the incredible rabbinic leadership here in North Carolina and all across the faith lines, but I want you to feel the love and strength that we bring to you today. And you give to us because you speak the words of truth that affirm everything that is good and right in our world. So feel the strength rise. Feel the sense of outrage rise. But when they go low, we go high.
That's right. That's right.
And when people are saying that this is part of some manipulation of justice, this is injustice. There's a name for it.
Right.
It's not to protect our democracy. It's not to protect our Constitution. It is not to protect our values. It is an affront to all of them. And we will not be silent, and we will not be stopped. And we are going to take down those barriers and affirm the sacred right to vote, and in so doing to liberate our democracy and to strengthen it, and we will do it together, and it will be done. Thank you.
take questions if there are any, while persons are thinking. Mary McLeod Bethune went out to build a college, and she started on a trash heap. And somebody said, "Why are you out there on that trash heap, or that garbage dump? That land doesn't look like anything could be done, and you can't do it by yourself." She said, "I know, but I believe this, if I start working, somebody will come help me."
That's right.
So all of us, democracy, NAACP, here, we tried to just fight here. Long time folk just said it was just a local issue. But now people understand this battle has national significance. And Rabbi Dina came, and then she brought some friends, and so we thank you. And I've been thinking, I wanted to do a little, metaphor. The prophets love metaphor. So this is the president right here, right?
Yeah.
I want to do something.
Steve
All right. And then let me see, Brother Jacob, and Rabbi Dina, and Brother Preston. Let me see, Preston. I got an idea here. Get on. Let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. David said, "I don't mind going fight Goliath, but let me pick up 5 stones." maybe our 5 stones are truth and love and Rabbi Dina, justice, and then the next stone would be the Reformed Jews and all of your connections, and then that other stone would be the NAACP and the Forward Together Moral Movement. And if we put all these 5 stones together, we might use one and knock something down and then have 4 more left. But we're so thankful that we're able to stand together and fight for what is right. I do believe that Rabbi Heschel and Dr. King are together right now in the spirit, just shouting and rejoicing and reminding us from the echoes of glory and from the place of goodness. Walk together, children, and don't you get weary. And we will not get weary in this fight. Any questions? Any questions for all of you by live stream? Shalom. Amen. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you.